Other people complain of just being all of a sudden very fatigued doing things that didn't fatigue them before. So these are very common symptoms, and these are things that healthcare professionals in the VA and elsewhere really need to pay attention to. And when they see somebody with those symptoms, link them, if they can, to some event that happened before, like a blast injury, altered mental status at the time of that blast injury. So linking an event, a traumatic event, to those symptoms are what healthcare professionals need to do, particularly in the VA, where we know so many folks are coming back from these conflicts with traumatic brain injury.
In the case of Eddie Ryan, his needs extend beyond memory and behavioral issues to include rehabilitation therapy for the acute problems he has with motor skills.
My role is primarily to keep Eddie's muscles from, like I said, from getting contractures, keeping them stretched out, keeping his muscles elastic so they can move. So if the brain does heal, he has the ability to have function, so he's not so bound up. Also to help strengthen the good parts that are still functional, and help him rebuild the pathways from the brain to the muscles. Because Eddie has feeling throughout his body, the only thing he's lacking are the motor skills.
Even before Eddie began receiving therapy, the Ryans found themselves in a situation that many veterans and their families are faced with today: a lack of resources about where to turn to for help immediately following the injury.
We didn't know where to go. We didn't know who to turn to. It's like you have a son who has a brain injury, and there you are. And so what do? You're in hospital after hospital, you're going from agency to agency, you finally get home, and now you're home. And who do you call? Unless someone would come up to my husband and I and say, hey, there's this agency, there's this organization, there's this association that can help with TBI or with whatever, we would never know what was available to us. But, especially TBIs, because there's a lot of that going on, to have that access to know, hey, I can call the Brain Injury Association. They could come in and they can give me some resources that I can use to help. So I'd like to see that happen, because we didn't have that. So we were scrambling around looking for help anywhere we could get it. And so that would be something I'd like to see.
The Ryans soon discovered that locating resources meant confronting the harsh reality of finding service providers who were trained to work with individuals with a TBI.
We do live in the mountains, but should that make a difference? Should it be a reason why you can't get home health care or therapies to your home? I think not, these young men and women go to serve our country, and they come back and they don't have health care. It's sad that we have to constantly battle for help for our son, and I know that these are the families who are going through the same exact thing. Some of the aides that had come to our home were not properly trained in TBI, and that was difficult because, I knew a lot of the issues that he had, and that was easy for me to do. It was easy for me to train a lot of the aides to help in those areas. But when you're dealing with a TBI, I firmly believe that the people that are coming into the home should have some experience with that, because it becomes difficult for that person and frustrating as well, because some of them, are afraid of what is there, and so a lot of times they end up leaving. And that becomes hard for us, because then we're left with no help at all. And the only reason that we've done what we've done is because we're desperately in need of help. If you're just here and you're not understanding the injury, then you can't help the family to become a unit anymore. And that's what we were looking for. We were looking for someone trained in TBI to come in, keeping Eddie safe, alert, and going, while we became that family unit again.
My family is my heart, my soul. my food, my well-being. I love you, Mom.
I love you too, buddy.
I love you, Dad.
When I was in medical school many years ago, we used to think that the brain was how it is. It doesn't change. If it's injured, that's it. You're basically out of luck. But now we know that the brain is plastic. And what do I mean by that? I mean it can adapt to change. It's almost like a vast computer network. You can imagine a computer network not functioning well if some of those wires are clipped. And what the brain is trying to do is to reconnect in a way to make things function again. It won't function typically as well as it did before the injury, but it's the brain's attempt to get better, to allow folks to do the things that are important for them to do.
As the brain begins to heal, the reality of the situation starts to set in. This can often lead to overwhelming feelings of frustration, anger, and depression as recovering individuals struggle with the issue of not allowing the brain injury to ultimately define who they are.
I guess the best way to describe us dealing with it would be that it's been a roller coaster ride, and we're still all learning to cope with it. We're still coping with it. Brian's still coping with it. All of our families, because it affects them, his parents, my parents. It's had its ups and downs. He was really positive in the beginning. He was so determined to fight the injury and bounce back from it, and he didn't really realize the impact it was going to have on his life and the speech and everything else. I don't think he realized how much work that needed and that it might not all come back because he was gaining such strides with the physical side of it so quickly. And when he realized that, depression sunk. It just set in so heavy. Our son went through a stage where he just didn't understand, was angry. His dad was gone for so long. I had to be with him at the hospital to take care of him. My children stayed with my sister because I just had to be there with him. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move. He didn't know if a nurse was going to be in the room, as great as they were, but he was paranoid and scared. And my son was angry. He didn't want to sit beside him at the table, and that was really hard for Brian. My daughter was kind of turned into a little mother, and she wanted to take care of everybody and make everyone happy.
It's like living with some, say your parents like are in their 80s. That's the best way I can describe it. It takes time for the brain to analyze what you're asking, and you just move slower. Your brain don't function as fast as somebody that's normal.
I think perhaps the biggest challenge as a rehabilitation clinician is dealing with the very painful discrepancy between who a person was before their brain injury and who they are now. Because you have a very distinct idea of who you are and what your abilities are. To wake up one day and to have a significant chunk of those challenged is a devastating thing. And so much of therapy is dealt with mourning real losses, maximizing abilities so you can compensate for the other weaker skills, and that ultimately then you can begin to function at a better level.